So if you recall, Matthew has divided his gospel into 5 sections that roughly correspond with the 5 books of the Torah. And he opens it with like an introduction and then has a conclusion, and those are the bookends. And then there are these 5 sections in the middle. And we're moving to the 5th section, or the 5th scroll, if you will, the Deuteronomy section. And it is packed with narrative wisdom. It is what is Deuteronomy about? One of the things Deuteronomy is about is how now to live in this promised land that finally the children of Israel are actually entering. And so Deuteronomy is a second giving of the law with a few minor adjustments. Well, so we are preparing in Matthew here to live in this new promised land of the already kingdom of heaven is here and also not yet. And what does that look like? So Team Matthew's inviting us into this. Another thing that happened in Deuteronomy was the last words of Moses, where he predicted the future calamities that would happen to Israel because of their rebelliousness and so on. And we've got a section like that coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Chapter 19, verse 1. When Jesus had finished these words, what words? This refers to what we studied last week. The parable of forgiveness is where we just left off. And remember, the chapters came much later, hundreds of years after Jesus. So this was all one unified thing as you're reading. So you've just read about the forgiveness parable and the king who forgave the 10,000 talent debt. Remember that? And then the servant who wouldn't forgive the 100 denarius debt, and what happened to him? Well, as soon as Jesus finished these words, now he's going to talk about entering the promised land. So forgiveness is the first step, essentially. He left Galilee and came into the region of Judea. Judea is the central focus of it's the religious center of the world. This is where Jerusalem is. Beyond the Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. So here they are, entering the promised land across the Jordan, so to speak, and large crowds are following him, entering with him, and he's healing them. So that's why this follows the forgiveness parable. Verse 3, some Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him. Test Jesus. I love that. And this is their test. And asking, so is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? So there's this big debate. If you did the pre-work, you have a little introduction to this. There's this big debate in the first century about, okay, divorce is a thing in the Torah. There's 2 places where it's mentioned. We could spend an hour on each. It's so cool. Anyway, it's mentioned twice in the Torah. Deuteronomy is the relevant passage here, Deuteronomy 24. And there was this debate because in the Deuteronomy 24 passage, it says that if a man divorces his wife for a reason, and so the debate was, so is it any reason or is it a particular reason? Maybe she just displeases him. And there was a group that, and this was the group that among the populace at any rate had a little more sway, even though the scholars were kind of on the other side, and which was like any reason. She just displeases you for any reason. You can divorce her. And the other group says, no, it has to be a substantial reason. So I have to reframe our context a little bit. Remember, we're going to be good tourists. If we take our current experience of divorce and what that means and the cultural divide on divorce, and we impose that on the first century Jewish culture, we are going to miss the point that Jesus is making. The debate about divorce now is extremely important. And I do think there is wisdom in all of the scriptures, including Jesus' words here, that we can take and that we can apply. But there is a different framework occurring here that we need to wrap our minds around first before we do any attempts at application, because we'll miss the point. In the ancient world, and particularly in Jewish culture, divorce was just different than it is today. Now, in pagan culture, divorce meant, girl, you are on your own entirely. It was what a man typically did to a woman. In Jewish culture, at least in ancient times, pre-Torah times, it worked much the same way. So a man could decide to divorce his wife for various reasons, usually because he found a wife that he liked better and he couldn't support both of them or didn't want to support both of them. And what happened to the wife? Well, unless she had a family to go back to that had the ability to sustain her, which was definitely not always the case, she was a destitute person. She was among the poverty-stricken class as a result of that. And so there were some laws in the Torah to mitigate that disaster. And so in the first century, the debate was, again, this is all about men divorcing their wives. This is what this is all about. It doesn't mean that women divorcing their husbands is not also an issue that needs to be addressed, but that's not what Jesus is addressing here. He's addressing men divorcing their wives and leaving them destitute. So they want to know, which side of the debate are you on? This is male-dominated culture, and it has been, at least in the eyes of the Jewish people here, ever since the fail. Because remember Yahweh's lament in Genesis chapter 3? Okay, here's how it's going to roll. He's going to rule over you, and your desire is going to be over him. And this is going to be this conflict. This was not like a command of Yahweh. This was a lament of Yahweh. And sure enough, that's exactly what has happened in the ancient world. Men are ruling over women and deciding when to keep them and when to cast them away. So when can we do this, Jesus? Can we do it for any reason? Or do we have to have a good reason? So this is what Jesus is dealing with. And he answered and said, okay, he's going to the Torah here, but he's going to the beginning of the Torah. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, that's a direct quote, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. He's going to page 2 of the Bible. So they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no person is to separate. So they're saying, where's our loophole? And Jesus is like steering their question away from their loophole. So, they just want to be able to get rid of their wives when they want to. And he's redirecting them to God's intention in creation pre-fail. Men and women in marriage are supposed to reflect God's relationship with us. So you don't willingly abandon your wife any more than you would cut yourself in half, would you? Is what Jesus is trying to get them to see. He knows what they're trying to get at. He knows, of course, that they're trying to get him to take sides in this debate so they know how big their loophole is. But he's not even really addressing what they think the point is. He's redirecting them to a more important point. They want to know how to handle this mess, and Jesus is pointing them to the best. Now, this is what God actually intended. And they're not satisfied. Verse 7, they're like, no. Well, if that's the case, then why did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away? This is Deuteronomy 24. First of all, if you read that, it's not a command. If you read it, it's like when this happens, when a man gives his wife a certificate of divorce and then following. It's not like you should give your wife a certificate of divorce. But the point is that they don't care about God's best. They want to be able to cast their wives into social vulnerability so that they can have whatever they happen to want, but still be seen as holy, right? And maintain their religious privileges. The Deuteronomy 24 reference is actually about protecting the honor of a wife who has been abandoned. If you read that passage, and this would be like a wonderful 3-hour study. I mean, it really would. The one who abandoned her, meaning if she's been remarried and widowed, can't take her back. So guy gives her a certificate of divorce, but she, instead of being vulnerable and unmarried the rest of her life, she remarries. And then her husband dies. Well, the original husband could say, oh, she just inherited a bunch of land. So now I want her back. You see? And the Torah says, no, you don't. That's not how you're gonna roll. It's not how you're gonna treat her. You can't play that game with a woman just for your own gain. That's the point of Deuteronomy 24 passage. The Pharisees only have eyes for the part with, quote, if a man finds something displeasing about her and writes a certificate of divorce, they think that's the command. See how they're missing the complete point here? That's the circumstance, but it's not the command. As if the law of Moses says, yeah, give your wife a certificate of divorce because she's displeasing. But it wasn't. That was the cultural norm. The law in question was prevent it from turning that custom into an evil, manipulative land grab. So Jesus answers them, verse 8. He says, well, all right. So now he's addressing the certificate issue. He says, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning, remember the beginning that he talked about? It's not been this way. Divorce, in other words, was an accommodation to hard human hearts. It wasn't God's heart. After the fail, as we talked about, the mutual trust that the man and the woman had was lost, and God predicted they would try to rule each other. Typically, the man would come out on top, but that wasn't God's heart. His heart is Genesis page 1 and 2, where the two are one, and they could actually trust each other. And then he says, remember, he's talking to these men who are looking for loopholes, saying, get rid of their wives to get shiny new ones, okay? That's who he's talking to. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. So to Jesus, casting away a wife for any reason whatsoever except that she's left him for someone else, okay? Adultery. Because she's casting him away there. It's totally out of bounds. It's oppression. It's oppression because it makes her a social outcast just so this guy can get somebody else. And what has Jesus this whole time been trying to teach the Pharisees? Chesed. Chesed, mercy. Is that, chesed, loyal, loving, kindness, lifelong, determined, loving, merciful? I mean, that's what that word means, right? Is that when you just get rid of your wife for any reason whatsoever? They have not done their homework on Hosea 6:6, have they? It says, I desire mercy, chesed, not sacrifice. So the oppressor, the one who's oppressed his wife, cast her off, put her into this position of social vulnerability, has got to own the fact of his adultery. He's got to own it. So the Pharisees, they've been dealt with, and the disciples have overheard this. And the disciples are trying to wrap their minds around this. This is so interesting how they respond. The disciples said to him, well, if the relationship of the man with his wife is like this, I'm better not to marry. We can't trade up? This is what's going on here. You see what I'm saying? It's like, well, you're not entering the debate. You threw the debate away and you're saying the whole rest of our lives? Same lady? And Jesus' answer is so multi-layered and cool. He said to them, well, not all men can accept this statement, but only those to whom it's been given. Hey, there's eunuchs who were born that way from their mother's womb. You're a male disciple, and Jesus starts talking about eunuchs, and it's like, just picture this, right? And there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by people. You have to bring that up, Jesus. And there are also eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. So the one who's able to accept this, let him accept it. Okay, this is a bold provocation to freak these 12 guys out. Jesus, and the men are the disciples that's speaking about here. Jesus just took away one of the privileges of being a guy in first century Palestine, in first century Judea and Galilee and so forth, is you can divorce your wife either for a good reason or maybe any reason at all and get a shiny new one, and he just took that away. And then Jesus latches on to the second part of their statement where they say, well, it's just better not to get married if we have to. And he's like, yeah, there are certain gifted people that can accept that life, gifted people. Why? Because of the eunuch situation, of course. All right, so eunuch situation in the first century AD. What is going on? Jesus is using the word eunuch in general to talk to a person who cannot or will not marry, but eunuch technically refers to someone that is missing their male genitalia, either by birth, some accident at birth or genetic thing at birth, or by occupation, meaning when they were a child, because they were slated to serve a queen or something, their genitalia was removed so that they couldn't create babies with the royal females. This is how this worked. There were different reasons that you would make someone a eunuch. So obviously, marriage is probably not in the cards for them. Or by lifestyle, he says, but he adds this other dimension. He says, what if someone says, I'm not gonna get married because I'm just gonna devote my life to the kingdom of heaven. I'm gonna devote it to God and not even get married. And Jesus throws that in there too. And Jesus, there's like this undertone of humor. They're saying, we can't divorce our wives when we want to? Better not to get married. And he's like, oh, you don't wanna be stuck by showing chesed to your wife that God intended to be your counterpart in one flesh? Well, okay, God loves eunuchs too. You can be one of those. I'm sorry, but, and maybe, I don't know. Okay, verse 13. Then, after this discussion, some children were brought to him so that he would lay his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. Why would the disciples rebuke these people? You don't bother Jesus with children. But Jesus said, leave the children alone. Don't forbid them to come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And after laying his hands on them, he departed from there. So this is connected to the previous story because this is about the vulnerable again. The divorce thing was all about vulnerability and showing mercy and chesed to those who can be, rather than dispossessing somebody in society. The vulnerable, the lower status of children in the ancient world, we talked about that last week. I don't know that I need to repeat that. That was disturbing to some of you. But in the ancient world, children were they were not viewed in a high way at all. Jewish culture was better by a lot than the broader ancient world, but it was still, hey, most of these kids die. We don't want to invest too much hope in them until they reach a certain age. So, and the disciples, they're grown up in this, so they have a little bit of this mindset too. They're like, don't bother the teacher with these little kids. And it's big piggybacking in their minds about their thoughts about women. And Jesus wants them to have a different view, just like he wants them to have a different view of women. These are one flesh people. Why would you separate what God's put together? Women. Well, children are treasures because they're treasures. How do we know? Because if you're going to enter the kingdom of heaven life, you've got to be like one of these. So of course they're treasures. They're our role models. And so, okay. The next story is also connected to this. Matthew knows what he's doing. Matthew and his writing team, these are not random stories picked out of nowhere. They are thematically connected. Even though they don't seem that way when we just read passages, like pull them out, but they are. Verse 16. Well, someone came to him and said, well, teacher, what good thing shall I do so that I may obtain life into the age, eternal life? And he said to him, why are you asking me about what's good? There's only one who's good. But if you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Then he said to him, well, which ones? There's 613, plus a bunch of the Pharisees have added. And Jesus said, well, you shall not commit murder, shall not commit adultery, shall not steal, shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, you should love your neighbor as yourself. These are all from the Ten Commandments, except for the last one, which is in Leviticus. And the young man said to him, well, all these I've kept. What am I still lacking? And Jesus said to him, okay, well, if you want to be complete, go, sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. And then come follow me. But when the young man heard this statement, he went away grieving, for he was one who owned much property. Okay. This story has been placed here in this position by the Matthew writing team, partly the reason, is to explain why you have to be like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. So if any of you have ever had very young children, or maybe some of you have been young children once upon a time, I don't know. Think about maybe you're trying to get some toy and then you see your mom just walk around the corner out of your sight. What do? You don't still try to struggle with the heavy toy. You book it because it doesn't matter. You just need your mom. You can't let your mom out of your sight. And that heart of the little child is what the Father desires from us. It's like, possessions? I just don't want to lose sight of my Father. See what I'm saying? So the commands that Jesus quotes, they're all commands about loving other people, if you notice. All those, the ones he picked out, showing chesed to other people. And this is basically the Sermon on the Mount life. Matthew chapters 5 through 7. He's condensing it into these commands. The man, if you'll notice, he's not asking, how can I die and go to heaven? That's actually a slightly different question. But how can I live the kingdom of heaven life that you've been talking about all this time? How can I enter into this kingdom of, you say it's at hand. Well, how can I enter it? This life into the age that lasts forever, but I'm ready now. And the man wondered what he's missing because he actually knew he wasn't living Matthew 5 through 7. He's like, what am I still missing? What do I still lack? Something was still holding him back, and he wanted Jesus to identify it. And so Jesus very helpfully identified it. He says, your possessions. You love your stuff more than you love your neighbor. You want proof? Here's the proof. Just give it all away to love your neighbor, love the poor. Then follow me, and then you'll know that you love your neighbor as yourself. He loved his stuff more than his neighbor, so he also loved his stuff more than Jesus. Jesus is helping him out. By the way, I have a theory on that dude, but whenever we study the book of Mark, I'll tell you what it is. All right, verse 23. And Jesus said to his disciples, now this incident has just happened, truly I say to you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I say to you. So what he's doing is saying the same thing in different terms when he says that. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And when the disciples heard this, they were very astonished and said, well, and who can be saved? And looking at them, Jesus said to them, well, with people, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible. So what he's saying here is wealth competes with the Sermon on the Mount living. It's in competition. So this camel through the eye of a needle, I know that there's been a teaching about there being a gate called the Eye of the Needle in Jerusalem that a camel would have to get down on its knees in order to... It's not actually the case. I know, it's such a good teaching, but there's no evidence for there ever being a gate called the Eye of the Needle. I'm so sorry. I think he really is making a hyperbolic, like crazy. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's easier for an 18-wheeler to drive through a mouse hole, than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. He's making a really absurd, extraordinary comparison here. And so the disciples, they look at this literally and like, well, you can't get a camel through the eye of a needle. That means, well, who can get saved? Because I got a little stuff. Though, just like everybody else, Jesus says. Get saved like everybody else gets saved. Because God does the impossible. It's what God does. So I really think Team Matthew is making this bold claim about a person's salvation. That yes, there's some big miracles in Matthew. There's the virgin birth. There's walking on water. But it's the miracle of someone coming to salvation because of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. That's the big one. Rich, poor, everybody in between. It's a miracle. It's getting a camel through the eye of a needle. All right, verse 27. And Peter responded and said to him, well, we've left everything and followed you. See what he's doing here? So what'll there be for us? And Jesus said to them, all right, truly, I say to you, that you who have followed me in the regeneration, it's the new heavens, new earth, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you shall also sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And not just you, but anyone and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms on account of my name will receive many times as much and will inherit eternal life. But here's the thing. Many who are first will be last, and last first. So yes, the 12, you're gonna have thrones like Jesus from which the tribes of Israel will be judged, but Jesus is saying multiple things. This is three-dimensional chess. He's not just referring to the future eschatological role in the apocalypse as we imagine it. There's something else going on here, which Matthew's gonna deal with at least partly soon. This whole first become last and last first thing, it's true in general, but it's also a prediction that has these particular disciples in mind. And he also has a future disciple, I think, in mind. And he's gonna elaborate on this in the next story, what this is all about, the first becoming last and the last becoming first. And he tells this very disturbing story. Ready for it? Chapter 20. For the kingdom of heaven you wanna know what the kingdom of heaven's like? I'll tell you. It's like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, that's a standard one-day wage. Silver denarius is a coin, a little bit bigger than a dime in diameter and thicker. So that was the agreed upon wage, and he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to those, he said, well, you go into the vineyard also, and whatever's right, I'll give you. So he didn't settle on a price. He just says, whatever's fair, I'm going to give you that. And so they went. And again, he went out about the 6th hour and the 9th hour. So the first people, how long have they been working? Many hours. But he did the same thing. So there's 9th hour people that are coming. There's, early in the morning people that are working. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing around. Oh, even more. And he said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day long? And they said, well, nobody hired us. And he said, you go into the vineyard too. Now when evening came, which wasn't long after, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the laborers, pay them their wages, starting with the last group to the first. And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each one received a denarius. It's a full day's wage. What? They worked 40 minutes? And when they received it, And so when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, obviously. Well, maybe we'll get 12, or at least a few. Those lazy people worked for 40 minutes, get a denarius. But each of them also received 1 denarius. And when they received it, they grumbled at the landowner, saying, oh, no. These were hired last. They worked an hour, and you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day's work in the scorching heat. But he answered and said to them, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Didn't you agree with me for a denarius? Take what's yours and go. But I want to give this last person the same as to you. Isn't it lawful for me to do what I want with my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? That's why the last shall be first and the first last. So there's this biblical motif that starts in the 4th page of the Bible, actually even before that, but it's more subtle, about the latecomer and envy of the latecomer from the firstcomer, or the older brother envying the younger brother because the younger brother getting favor. This is a whole thing in the Bible. Cain and Abel, that's what that's all about. It sets it up, but it's not just there. It's Esau and Jacob. It's Ishmael and Isaac. It's Reuben and the older brothers and Joseph. I mean, it's all over the place in the Bible. So this is like a repeated theme. And Jesus is building on this. In another gospel, he uses, there's another story recorded about 2 brothers and the older being envious of the younger. You know that story? Yeah, it's the prodigal son story. It's really about the older brother. So what if Jesus, so this is Jesus building on this. And it's like, you guys, you want all this? What if, say, there's an apostle who comes much later and doesn't experience all this with me, doesn't do the 1.5 to 3 years of ministry with me and go through all this stuff, but I choose him to be the same as you guys. How are you going to respond? That actually does happen. Anyway, verse 17. So there's some takeaways here, aren't there? As Jesus was about to go up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 aside by themselves, and on the road he said to them, behold, look, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and they will hand him over to the Gentiles to mock and flog and crucify. And on the 3rd day, he will be raised up. This is the 3rd time Jesus has made this sort of statement to them. Time number 3, and it's the last time. He's inviting the disciples, would you open your eyes here to this first and last thing? Who is the first, really, in the whole universe? The true first. It's Jesus. And what's he about to do? So open your eyes, please, if you're going to see what this whole kingdom of heaven thing that you want to know about, and that this rich man wanted to know about. Everybody wants to know about how do we get in? And open your eyes. And this is the most detailed and explicit explanation of what's about to happen in order to just reset their whole expectations on what life is. He's going to be enthroned to the highest place by enduring suffering in the lowest way. Now, the next two stories are linked to this statement of Jesus as to what's going to happen. So the disciples, and they're represented by two in particular, James and John, their eyes are not open, are they? They're blind to the whole principle of becoming last and not fighting for first. Frederick Bruner, in his commentary, one of the great commentaries that I used here, the location of our text here is important. This third and last passion prediction is placed exactly between Jesus' warning parable against spiritual pride in the last story and Jesus' warning encounter with spiritual ambition in the next story. Pride? Hey, wait a minute, we've been working here. And ambition, which we're going to see soon. Precisely when the disciples begin to think how much better they were than the rich young ruler, on the one hand, and of how they could climb to higher places of power in Jesus' kingdom, 12 thrones. On the other, Jesus announces that he goes to Jerusalem to die. This is when he says that. Thus, the unifying theme of our chapter, including the story that happens next, is first and last, servant leadership. Verse 20. So, Jesus saying, I'm going to die, raise up on the third day. So, James and John's mom, this is so cool. The mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons. I don't know, I just picture her having them by the ears, maybe not, probably not. But bowing down and making a request of him, and he said to her, what do you desire? And she said to him, say that in your kingdom, these two sons of mine shall sit, one at your right and one at your left. Moms are like, yeah, I can see myself asking that. But Jesus replied, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? He's addressing her, but talking to them, that thing he does. So they said to him, we are able. And he said, okay, well, my cup you shall drink, but sit at my right hand and my left. It's not mine to give. It's for those for whom it's been prepared by my Father. All right, James and John, they come to Jesus as little children, don't they? Mom. So mom's speaking for them. See, we got the little children thing. Here we are, little children. It's just so epic a misunderstanding of what Jesus was talking about with having the heart of a little child. And so in your kingdom, meaning when you get enthroned, say that these will sit on one on your right, one on your left. This is mom saying this. I want you to highlight this, bookmark it, put a pin here. Have you ever wondered, I wonder who the Father has in mind for that? If you've read this story before, it's like, the Father has somebody in mind to sit on his right and left. I wonder who that is. The Bible is full of ambiguities that are meant to draw our attention that there's no real answer to. This is not one of those ambiguities. Matthew's going to tell us. Wait about 3 weeks. You don't know what you're asking. And we're going to find out that they really don't. Somehow this involves the cup of suffering. See, Matthew's giving us a clue here, but they want to be next to Jesus at his coronation. Their expectations, he's like, you've got to reset what that means. I'm sorry, the answer to this riddle is really very moving. Sorry. He's going to tell us. who the Father has chosen for that. We'll get there. Verse 24. After hearing this, the other 10 disciples, they act like the envious laborers, right? They become indignant with the two brothers. They're like, what did they just do? But Jesus called them to himself. They did this little power play where they come to him as little children to try to get the biggest reward. And they're furious. Jesus called them to himself and said, all right, come here. Come on, huddle up. Called them to himself. You know how the rulers of the Gentiles, the world out there, domineer over people? The rulers do that? And those in high position exercise authority over them? You know how that rolls? Well, yeah, like everywhere. It is not this way among you. Whoever wants to become prominent among you shall be your servant. Whoever desires to be first among you shall be your slave. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So big chain reaction of envy. And Jesus is trying again to explain the primary principle of the kingdom of heaven leadership, how it works. Fight for the bottom. That's the principle. Leadership in the kingdom of heaven, fight for the bottom. The people that work hard to get to the top, and if they have to push a few people down to make it happen, push someone down so you can be elevated. They're everywhere. It's like a dime a dozen. This is how the rebellious cosmic powers roll, right? I mean, it's the norm. And God, he's not looking for that, for the scramble to the top people. He's just not. Let the powers of the world do their thing. God's searching for the very rare few who will fight for the bottom. Those are the people he wants to change the world with. How can you change the world if you're at the bottom? Jesus is about to show how you do that by example. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's so important, and we miss it intentionally. We don't want to do this. All right. So think of Jesus. The Bible calls him the firstborn of all creation. He is the older brother. He is the ultimate older brother, isn't he? He's existed from the infinite past. He is God in the flesh. He is the ultimate older brother. And what does he do with us? Push us down to get higher? He lifts us up by lowering himself and fought for the bottom so that we could actually be saved and be chosen. This is what Cain was supposed to do. He was supposed to lift up his brother. That was when God said, you can still do well. That was the role. Jesus knows this, and he's going to do it. He's going to be the right older brother. Anyway. So the disciples are blind. They're blind. Their eyes are not open. They're blind to the meaning of when Jesus said, behold, we're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and scribes. They'll condemn him to death. They'll hand him over to the Gentiles and to mock and flog and crucify. Third day, he'll be raised up. So they're in danger of making the very same mistake that the rich young ruler made. Because remember, his possessions mattered more than following Jesus. In the case of the disciples, their dreams of power were in competition with their call to follow Jesus. And he's calling them out on it. So now Matthew inserts another seeing story here to contrast. So they're leaving Jericho, and a large crowd followed him, and two people who were blind. He's done this before. So why is Matthew writing about this? Didn't it happen? Well, yes, it happened. So many blind people are getting healed throughout this that Matthew is not bringing up. He'll say there were many healings in the crowd. So there's lots and lots of blind people getting healed. But when he mentions them in particular, he's doing a literary move. That's what he's doing here. He could mention all sorts of healings that are happening. He's specifically mentioning these two blind people because he wants you to contrast them seeing with the disciples being blind. Two people are blind. They're sitting by the road. They're hearing that Jesus was passing by. And what do they cry out? Lord, Kyrios, Adonai, have what on us? Mercy, chesed, eleos. This is the same theme. On us, son of David, you're the Messiah. But the crowd sternly warned them, be quiet. Why? Because there's just a couple of blind people. Quiet. But they cried out all the more, Lord, son of David, have mercy, chesed, eleos, on us. This is such an important word in Exodus 34, verse 6 and 7. But particularly verse 6, Yahweh is telling Moses his own character, and this word is central here. There are a few words that Yahweh says he is, and chesed is one of them. This is so important. So Jesus stopped and called them and said, okay, what do you want me to do for you? It's like he always invites them into this partnership of, so he knows they're blind. And they said to him, Lord, we want our eyes to be opened. And what has Jesus been trying to do with his disciples? But they ask it humbly for mercy. Open our eyes. I think by extension, Matthew wants the reader to say, yeah, that's what I want. I want my eyes to be opened here to what Jesus is saying, but this I don't get it, but I want my eyes open. Verse 34, moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes, and immediately they regained their sight, followed him. So the power play incident in Jesus' teaching on true victory occurs near Jericho. That's where they were leaving. And remember, Jericho has meaning in the minds of the readers. It's the place of that iconic victory over that walled city in Joshua. The walls of Jericho fell down. So marching around a wall for 7 days kind of seemed like a worthless strategy for wall crushing, didn't it? Suffering and death and making yourself last seems like a worthless strategy for the victory of the Messiah, doesn't it? Note that there's a large crowd following him. This is an important crowd. This particular crowd is going to be the ones who are shouting Hosanna when he enters Jerusalem shortly. So 2 disciples, James and John, have perfectly good eyes, but they can't see. So of course, Matthew and his writing team follow this up with a story about 2 blind men whose eyes are opened. Of course they do. See what they're doing? These blind men, they don't ask Jesus for prominence. They ask him for chesed, mercy. And the disciples are all in a fuss about their honor. Who's going to be sitting next to you? What about us? We've given up everything. And these blind men are risking the dishonor of all the people. So be quiet, shh, be quiet. They're looked down upon, they're making noise. And they call Jesus Lord and Son of David. They see who Jesus is already before they ask for healing. And Jesus is moved by compassion to align their physical eyes with their excellent spiritual eyes. They have excellent eyes. All right, so original readers, what are they thinking at this point? I think that because they know the end of the story, the original readers, they do. With all the original readers or listeners to this story, they start with the resurrection. The resurrection is known. And they know the cross came before that. And I think they're picking up here the cross is actually not something to be ashamed of like it was in that culture. It's actually how the kingdom of heaven comes. And also envy and jockeying for position are not matching up with the kingdom life, are they? Maybe also they can take that, maybe we need Jesus more than we need our stuff. All right, what about us though? Because we don't have to think those things, right? That was just for them. I'm joking. But how do we reflect on these chapters? I want you to, I was trying to think of an analogy to show you how important it is to fight for the bottom. Think of who's been most positively influential in your life. Is it somebody who kind of was a tyrant over you and beat you down constantly? Or was it somebody in your life that lifted you up, even at their own expense, in the hopes that you would become greater than them? Who's had a bigger positive influence on you? So which one should we be like? So which kind of leaders does Jesus call us to be? The people who scramble for the top? The ones who fight for the bottom? So the times in my life that God's given me the grace, and it's all his grace, not me, I assure you, to fight for the bottom, miracles happen. Miracles happen. And what's cool is I'm not even talking about miracles happening in my life, but in the lives of people around me. Miracles happen. Okay, so we'll take a moment with we haven't done this in a while. Can we give a hand to our table here? Every week we have folks that are put on the spot, so thank you. Any thoughts, y'all?
Well, I think a lot of things, but I think you did a great job. And I always learn so much from this. But I have been recently just on fire for the Lord, Holy Spirit just guiding me and all of that, so that it's easy for me to see my past compared to this. And I see like the Pharisees and the disciples, and they're growing up in this world where you're shaped by culture, and change is hard, and change is just so hard in general. But in my life it's hard. Throughout my whole life it was hard, and then then the Holy Spirit filled me, then change was easy. Change was something I desired. Yes. And every single week that you teach this, it always comes through to me that it's a heart issue. And it's like the hardening of the hearts the shell has to be cracked, broken, humbled, softened, so it can be changed and molded and reshaped. And so the first chapter we did, I think it really is just about like letting, it's just so new for them. And so, okay, that. And then again with the rich man and his possessions, I mean, we're taught to think that and to gather as much as we can. And I thank God every day for this guy because he's so giving. And I was raised in a single parent home where we like held on to our resources, and this guy's just giving them all away. And I'm like, what are you doing? And so it's a good balance, and he's a good example. But it's easier now. It's so easier now. And I just see the change. Of course, the disciples get it after Jesus dies and reappears, and their whole life is committed to. And the other thing I was thinking was, like, if our Great Commission is to bring souls to heaven. Okay, now I'm changing the subject to a different part. If we're supposed to bring souls to heaven, and so how can we, like the story of the workers all day who didn't get, worked a little and got the same amount of pay, like we have discussed about like Hitler or just bad people that we don't know if they went to heaven. We don't know what happened at the very end. Or what about the guy that's on the cross with Jesus? He didn't live a life devoted to Jesus, but if your heart is true and genuine and you truly turn to Jesus in your last month, in your last minutes or whatever, the people who have lived for Jesus their whole lives, maybe they feel like that, like, what the heck? But no, like God wants us all. And he just wants us to turn to him, whether it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 1 year ago. He's so happy to have us. So that story, okay, I think I'm done.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's, you're connecting all of it, yeah. Yeah, and just to say that, you know, there are people like Hitler and Mussolini and maybe Genghis Khan and just these iconic evil villains. I think that it's appropriate that we have them in our minds as like reflections of the rebellious cosmic powers, just because you see the life that they lived, and it's like, well, I don't see any redemption. So I don't know that for me personally, it's ever helpful to think of, oh, I'll see one of these dudes, you know. But what I do find more helpful, maybe I'm just not there yet, is when I think of the worst person who's done the worst things to me, personally. And that maybe they called out in the name of the Lord in their last breath or something. How will I feel if I see them? Yeah, no, it's okay. It's all right. But I'm just saying. Yes, for sure.
Kind of like you, I have like all these like thoughts rolling around in my head. So, man, I love this. I love Jesus. He is just so good.
Yeah.
He loves the hurting people, the sick people, the ugly people, the stinky people, our broken, fallen world. I mean, he loves us, and we're awful. And so, you know, I know that you've got girls too, and I'm trying to teach my girls kind of like how you're saying your husband is a model. Like, let's give all of our things away. They're trash. They're worthless. They're pointless. That's not our purpose. And I'm trying to raise them like this thousands of years later. You know, this stuff is not important.
Yeah.
This is what's important. Let's fight for the people on the bottom. It's not important to rush to the car and get who's first. No, you step back. She was last. You let her go in first. You know, you hold the door for them.
It's kind of baked in, isn't it?
Right.
It's like, yeah, it's baked in.
So I love this. This is so good. It's so multifaceted with, you know, the last is first and the envy and the greed, and that's not what it's about. And man, we could read this every single day, and it still wouldn't get old.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's the same stuff, and it's just beautiful. I love it. Jesus is so good. And you're saying, you know, the children are our role models. It's true. We need to get down on their level because, you know, like you were saying with the kid following their parent, it's like when I tell them, hey, we're leaving, they're over there fiddling with a toy. And I'm like, I'm leaving. And they're like, ah, they throw their toys and they chase me. I mean, that's how we need to act about Jesus.
Follow
you know?
me.
All of this is trash. We got to go. We got to keep our eyes on Jesus. We got to follow him. You know, so this is awesome. I love it. Thank you for explaining all this stuff.
Thank you for two amazing reflections. I just appreciate both of you so much. That's awesome. All right, so we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
If there are questions, if there aren't any, we can leave early.
No, we have questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thou shalt not murder in the Old Testament. Many prophets like Moses, David committed murder. Was there a different meaning of thou shalt not murder or an explanation?
Nope. Same meaning. So thou shalt not murder. And the one who brought the tablet down with that command, what did he do? He murdered an Egyptian overlord, didn't he? So is he no longer in the kingdom of heaven? There is redemption for Moses. I assure you, there was redemption for Moses. David, by proxy, he committed murder, so broke that commandment. So there's also in the same list, thou shalt not bear false witness. It's on the same list. I just think we need to approach with humility. It's one of those when Jesus says, you know, we can see the speck in David's eye because it's really clear, and in Moses' eye. But man, sometimes there's a log obscuring our vision. I think that we have to sit there for a while. That's such a great question because we have to reckon with the fact that the Bible is like this the only religious document where the main people, other than Jesus, of course, the main heroes of this religious document, including the disciples, the founders of the Christian church after Jesus, are all presented as these incredibly flawed people. That says something about authenticity, doesn't it? No other religion that I know of does that. Okay, maybe one more. We got 30 seconds.
How did the Samaritan woman at the well have so many husbands back then?
Oh. It could have been many things. Going from one to another because she was desirable is a possibility. Also, people tended to die off is a possibility. So yeah, but the point is that she'd been, anyway, that's for the Gospel of John. We have to wait for that one. There's so much to that answer. And it is past our time. Okay. Don't forget, we got men's and women's. It's gonna be a great study tonight. I love you guys.